The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Wednesday, February 22nd, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to begin in East Palestine, Ohio, where Donald Trump showed up and made a scene that was welcomed. To be fair, it was wildly welcomed by the people of East Palestine. But you do understand, anytime Donald Trump shows up to a disaster, he makes it about himself. But let's begin. Let's begin first with a short clip of how the crowd responded to Donald Trump showing up to encourage the people and to deliver some of his Trump water. And ultimately, one of the reasons why, quote unquote, the people's president was trending on Twitter today. Take a listen in.
What do you make it about Biden not showing up? You showing up before he did.
Thank you so much for coming.
Get him out of here. Thank you so much. Hey, Trump, take a picture of my phone. Picture? There he is.
Now, of course, this is the residents of East Palestine who have suffered because of the Norfolk Southern train that derailed, causing a chemical toxic spill that has killed the wildlife in the area. The fish in the rivers are dead. The water is undrinkable, which is why Donald Trump is bringing in water, one of the many people, organizations, and institutions. So the people of East Palestine, they're going through it, and it is an indictment against the United States of America. It is an indictment against the train system here in the United States of America, capitalism more than anything else. But it is also an indictment against the Trump administration. It was the Trump administration that rolled back the Obama era rules that would have prevented this disaster. But that does not seem to dissuade the people of East Palestine, because they're just happy to see somebody show up, even if it's the person who is partly responsible for what happened. Here's Donald Trump in his speech before the mayor and other citizens of the city.
Especially thank some of the incredible people that helped us, because we're bringing thousands of bottles of water, Trump water, actually, most of it. Some of it we had to go to a much lesser quality water. You want to get those Trump bottles, I think, more than anybody else. But we're bringing a lot of water, thousands of bottles.
So good. That's a good thing. I'm not going to knock the man. This is what politicians do. They seize the opportunity of a crisis. And they, especially because Ohio is such an important state in every single election. So he's certainly getting a heads up on the 2024 campaign. So I'm not going to knock him for making a generous gesture, even if that gesture is for purely political purposes. But then again, when is anything done in this country that's not political? And of course, Donald Trump can't really do anything without going on a tangent that is as ridiculous as the fact that he is partly responsible for this disaster by rolling back the Trump era, or the Obama era rules. I'll give you more details on that in a moment. But here's one more clip of Donald Trump, not quite as bad as throwing paper towels while he was in Puerto Rico after the disaster there during his presidency. But here he is ranting about Ohio State football in the middle of a crisis.
It reminded me a little bit. I don't know if you remember when Ohio State wasn't going to be playing football for another season. They were going to sit back and watch with the China virus or COVID, whatever you want to call it. And I called the head of the Big Ten football. I said, you got to get this football open. And they were great. They responded, and Ohio State played that season. Nobody remembers that, I think, right? Does anybody know?
You know what Trump is really good at? Trump is really good at using people's graciousness to kind of like a virus spread further and further than he normally could. He ingratiates himself with his ridiculousness, and this is part of it. Not because he's talking about football in Ohio, which is a huge thing. I get it. It's, again, a decent political move. But I would not be bragging about pushing people back into the pandemic just so that they could play football. Now, don't get me wrong. The people in the audience, they loved it. So Trump, good on you. Good show today. But it just blows me away that these people who probably don't have enough time to, find out the fact that Donald Trump is partly responsible for the disaster. And honestly, these folks, God bless them, they probably still think the pandemic is a plandemic and that the vaccine has the mark of the beast in it. Because honestly, anyone bragging about that intermediate period when we had an opportunity to absolutely save hundreds of thousands of lives, I mean, close to 1 million lives we could have saved, but we're bragging about pushing everyone back into a football stadium, seat to seat, shoulder to shoulder, cheek to cheek. But again, Donald Trump understands American politics pretty well. He understands that they don't care about COVID-19 because he helped make sure of that. And he understands that they probably don't know that Donald Trump himself is partly responsible for this disaster because of what he did as president of the United States. But he's still trending today as the people's president. I would beg to differ, but of course, there are millions of people across this country who like their politicians. They like their politicians like Trump. They like politicians who are going to make them feel good, even if they end up getting them killed. That's kind of the way of America. I just want to confirm and verify something I've been saying. This came from Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, but it also has been fact checked that, yes, it was a 2018 rollback of brake requirements by the Department of Transportation underneath the leadership of Donald Trump that contributed to this disaster. The Department of Transportation repealed a mandate in 2018 that required safer brakes on trains that carried hazardous materials. And you know how Republicans and conservatives categorize this type of thing, this rule that they rolled back? They categorize it as red tape, bureaucracy, impediment on the free markets. These were moves that were made to increase the profit margins of these train companies. And it worked. They made a lot of money. And you know what also happened? Union workers warned everybody that this would happen. And what happened? The disaster happened because of the rollback of those brake rules. It just never ceases to amaze me what level of ridiculousness and absurdity American politics can devolve to. Because if anyone in East Palestine was actually paying attention, and of course, again, I always try to make room for the fact that most Americans are working so hard, and I'm sure it's the same in East Palestine. They're probably working 60, 70 hours a week, thanks to Republicans, right? But I digress. I'm not saying this to insult the people of East Palestine who are going through a lot right now, but those people who are celebrating Donald Trump when Donald Trump is partly responsible for the disaster. And then, not that I care that they are going after Joe Biden because he's not there yet. He's in Europe. He's making a tour. He went through Ukraine. He's right now in Warsaw, Poland. But they are very upset that he hasn't come to East Palestine yet. Okay. All right. Get over there, Joe. But I have a hard time receiving that criticism from people who are celebrating a president whose administration is directly responsible for the very disaster they're trying to survive right now. And again, maybe all the good folks of East Palestine are just too busy trying to survive, living paycheck to paycheck to actually even know that particular detail, right? Even less have time to look it up and verify it to make sure that it, fact check it. And so what do they do instead? They, same thing most Americans do. They take their favorite news broadcaster and use that. And if their news broadcaster didn't tell them that Donald Trump and his administration, they're responsible for this disaster, then instead of holding Donald Trump accountable, they'll celebrate him while attacking the president that had nothing to do with their disaster. But come on back home, Joe, and go in there and see the folks of East Palestine. You know what I always find as a strange argument, not entirely strange, I sometimes get the merits of this argument that I'm getting ready to give you, but I also feel like it's rather strange. The idea that we should not cover problematic people, politicians, or personalities. Every time we cover someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or someone like Nick Fuentes, we always get people who say to me directly or in conversations online in general, I always see the argument that we should not be giving these people this much attention. The idea is that we are increasing their profiles. All coverage, news coverage is good news. All media is good media, right? All press is good press. And there's some merits to that. I get it, right? Once you get a person who has, without a doubt, become a monster, part of the reason they became the profile they became was because everyone was talking about them. But there's obviously the catch-22. When you have people who are actively planning a quote-unquote American divorce, who represents a party that is actively preparing for and talking about a civil war on a regular basis, I think it rises to the level of necessary coverage. And I know that's very specific for Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I think generally speaking, we cannot avoid covering these people for fear of their notoriety going higher. Sure, they may become more famous, but with the right information given to you, at least they will be infamous versus someone that you may not even know about. And whatever, I'm not going to, you're not going to fall for Marjorie Taylor Greene, but the facts remains, we need to know what these monsters are up to. Now, all that prelude to this conversation, here is a conversation that we began last night about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her call for an American divorce. And while people were saying, oh, she's not, don't give it oxygen. Well, the very next thing she did was to appear on Fox News with Sean Hannity, one of the biggest shows on the biggest networks in this country, broadcasting to millions upon millions of people the idea and the argument behind what she wants to nicely call a divorce. But everyone understands full well that this country is teetering on the verge of a civil war because of insurrectionists like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here she is on Sean Hannity last night.
And here's my question. How did you get to this point? I mean, I look at topics. For example, how do you reconcile defund the police and no bail laws with law and order? How do you reconcile secure borders and wide open borders? How do you reconcile energy independence with energy dependence and new Green Dealism? How do you reconcile peace through strength with people that want to gut our defense? I don't see middle ground on a lot of these issues. So what is the other answer if it's not a divorce?
Well, exactly, Sean. That's the problem and where we are today. And in my life, in my world, all of my friends are regular Americans. Everyone I talk to is sick and tired and fed up of being bullied by the left, abused by the left, and disrespected by the left. And our ideas, our policies, our ways of life have become so far apart that it's just coming to that point. And the last thing I ever want to see in America is a civil war. No one wants that. At least everyone I know would never want that. But it's going that direction, and we have to do something about it.
Oh, really? So you actually did tie this directly to a civil war. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the fact that she said she and all the regular Americans that she hangs out with, what's that? Lily white conservatives from the deep South. Are those real Americans? Are those the really Americans you're talking about there, Marjorie Taylor Greene? I mean, she's disgusting. I oftentimes like to talk about her in terms of her eager pursuit to appear pretty on television. I mean, she spends an inordinate amount of time on wardrobe and makeup. I have long arcs of memory. I remember what she looked like when she first came out there. I mean, she was piss poorly thrown together, and somebody pulled her to the side and said, put yourself together. Like, I like to spend time on that because it means so much to her to not come off as an idiotic Neanderthal. So the only thing she could really do was dress it up with makeup, but her arguments are still very Neanderthalish. But it doesn't matter when you have an entire media infrastructure like Fox News that's sitting there waiting for an opportunity to lend validity and credibility to someone as backwards as Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, Sean Hannity is old enough to remember actual thinkers like Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley, right? I think they were still racist, but at least they were coherent thinkers. I wonder if Sean Hannity is embarrassed that he has to actually do the cleanup work to try to salvage the reputation of Marjorie Taylor Greene for the broader Republican Party, because she actually expected to be able to move into leadership. This is what this is for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Right? She's trying to stand out in this moment and grab headlines so that she can move into leadership for the Republican Party. But because her brain is not functioning like a normal human adult being, right? She makes an argument for civil war. And while she tries to backtrack it on Twitter, we went over it last night, like she made us a very long thread about why she isn't actually calling for civil war. She turns around and then goes to Sean Hannity and says, basically, civil war's coming.
And the last thing I ever want to see in America is a civil war. No one wants that. At least everyone I know would never want that. But it's going that direction, and we have to do something about it.
Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time in the patrons only episode coming up after the half-hour mark. And I'm going to break apart the prelude that was given by Sean Hannity, which he tried to set up a juxtaposition of our extreme differences to suggest that they are irreconcilable differences. I'm going to go line by line, and I simply will offer this, which would never be accepted by the Republican Party because they don't believe in facts. They don't believe in science. They don't believe in actual data. But whichever policies yield the best results data-wise, and when I say best results, I mean best results for people, for the people, right? For everyone. Not best results for the economy, because we've seen, nope, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that for the patrons only because I have a lot of more stories I need to cover before we get to that. Patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Senator Joe Manchin from the great state of West Virginia is, ruling out a run for president, and now he's not even 100% confident he's going to come up for re-election. I think he must have gotten an offer from a lobbying house or someone to offer him enough money so he can get a new Maserati and get a new yacht. The Democrat from West Virginia, I have an audio clip of him in a minute. You can hear it for yourself. But need I remind you, I don't think I do, how he has been 100% alongside, I guess I can't say 100%, alongside Kirsten Sinema and the other Democrats who chose to be the rotating villain during the Biden administration's first 2 years to make sure two things never happen. One, nothing good for the American people. Nothing. What have we gotten? Okay. Two, to make sure that the filibuster was never overturned so that they could make sure that nothing good ever happened for the people. That's Joe Manchin. I kind of wish that he would run again because there's some possible people who are going to run against him that would whip him potentially. I'm not going to, can't really say much more than that. But either way it goes, whether it be through defeat at the election ballot or by him stepping down and going to just go and make the money he wants to make, like get out of our way, get out of the way of the American people and let us just do the work that needs to be done. Yeah, that's a win for humanity. That's the type of person Joe Manchin is because of what he represents and who he represents. He doesn't represent the people of West Virginia. He represents the coal industry. Here he is talking about his plans for the future.
Wednesday morning.
10:26 Wednesday morning, as I said here in front of you, Hoppy, my dear friend, I appreciate so much a direct question you've asked. I don't know. I tell you this, what I do know, I'm going to do whatever it can to help my state and my country.
Where can you do that best?
Well, that's what I'm looking at right now, making that decision on where I can basically most effective. People are scared. They're scared about the crime going on in the country.
Oh, God.
They're scared about the border that we have.
Oh, Jesus.
And all of the illicit drugs coming over. And I'm scared. These are things I'm scared of, too. They're scared of the debt that we have right now that could be crippling. That can take us down quicker than anything. Geopolitical unrest. Now, you can't go too far left and too far right. There's nobody fighting for the middle.
Okay.
So where can I best fight for the...
You can go anywhere with those right-wing talking points that you're trying to represent as center, as moderate. Literally everything that came out of that man's mouth was rooted in conservatism. Now, see, this is why vote blue, no matter who, never really worked. It's part of the reason we are where we are. Americans are scared, Joe Manchin. Can I tell you why Americans are scared? They're scared because so many of them don't have health care. And those that do have health care are having their claims rejected by insurance companies. That's what people are afraid of, Joe Manchin, the real death panels on insurance companies. People are afraid. They're afraid of inflation that's being caused by profits, by greedy profiteers. They're terrified of the fact that they can't afford eggs anymore. They're terrified of the fact that they can't afford all the things that cost in this country, that the cost increased as a result of corporate greed. Americans aren't afraid of the crime that's going on. Crime has been here for us. We have been, the average American has been under assault by this system economically our entire lives. We are living paycheck to paycheck. Most of us don't have the ability to survive a $1,000 emergency. That's what people are afraid of in this country. So I surely hope some of these names that are floating around, I hope somebody primaries and destroys this man. If he chooses to step down, you should know, just like I'm confident, it's only because he is going to be going to a lobbying firm where he can make a whole lot more money. And I guarantee you, he's going to still actively be participating to try to make sure Americans don't get anything. There's literally no reason to have this man as a Democrat except to hold on to the majority in name only, because we can't get things done specifically because of him, Kyrsten Sinema, and the rest of these Republicans who dress up as Democrats and try to pretend as though they're centrist when all they're doing is recycling and regurgitating far right-wing conservative ideas that are even further to the right than Dwight Eisenhower. Okay? These modern Republicans, of which I include Joe Manchin, they are extremists. There's nothing moderate or centrist about them. There's nothing centrist about neoliberalism. There's nothing centrist about trickle-down economics. There's nothing centrist about austerity. But you let Joe Manchin tell it, there's nobody fighting for the center. Resign, Joe. Go and ride on your yacht in your Maserati. I haven't done a lot of coverage on the special counsel, Jack Smith, who is investigating Donald Trump's handling of classified documents, but that has shifted. And I think if there's a day for me to start covering it, it's today. A subpoena has been issued from Jack Smith's special counsel to Ivanka and Jared Kushner, I'll give you more details on that. And according to the New York Times, it appears as though Jack Smith is investigating Donald Trump's role in the physical attack on January 6th at the Capitol. According to the New York Times, quote, former President Donald J. Trump's daughter Ivanka and his son-in-law Jared Kushner have been subpoenaed by the special counsel to testify before a federal grand jury about Mr. Trump's effort to stay in power after he lost the 2020 election and his role in a pro-Trump mob's attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, according to two people briefed with the matter. Okay, that should be interesting. I would love to see some actual accountability for the attack on the country, because we all know one thing for sure. If they are not held accountable, Donald Trump, more than just Donald Trump, yes, Donald Trump, but every person of power and influence and finance who helped make this thing happen, if they're not held accountable, then they're simply going to do it again. They are simply going to do it again, and they will do it more successfully. We've seen this through history. Hitler first went to jail for what he attempted. Then when he got out, he was successful. If we do not have a system of laws that can hold previously unaccountable people, hold them accountable, then we don't have a system of laws. And the real question that we're dealing with here is whether or not they are ever going, this country, the United States of America, is ever going to hold a former president accountable for the crimes committed during their time. That's where we are. That's the real question of the day, because if the office of the presidency can be held accountable, and again, I don't want to make this too academic. There is the political persuasion part of this, and we could talk about that more. But from the academic perspective, the United States empire is really examining itself right now. It's really looking at itself, trying to figure out, will we ever hold a former president, a former Caesar? I mean, really think about it. I mean, they had a different way of handling Caesars back then, but I digress. The point is this. This country has never held any... George W. Bush should be in jail. All right? Out of all the presidents in my lifetime, if someone without question should be in jail, it should be the man who invaded an entire nation without cause, with false intelligence, killing upwards of 1 million Iraqis. How many Americans died? And it shouldn't have been in office in the first place because the Supreme Court gave it to him in 2000. I'm sorry, I don't know how old you guys are, but I remember all of it. I remember sitting, watching as the Supreme Court's decision came down and gave the presidency to George W. Bush. And that's when I knew in my heart that democracy was on the decline, if not already over. And so while we have a track record in this country of never holding presidents accountable, from George W. Bush to Richard Nixon, to Donald Trump, the question of the day, the question of the hour is, can and will America hold its leaders accountable? Now, to the political point, you have a spoiled man-child who has no clue about how to be a president. And so he made so many mistakes rooted in his ignorance as well as his arrogance. And the question is do we have the political willpower to go through the necessary fights to hold him accountable? Not just the office of the presidency, but Donald J. Trump. Well, I think Jack Smith might be the right person to answer that specific question. We'll see really soon if he's going to be held accountable, if there's any accountability that could be brought to Donald Trump, not only for the documents in Mar-a-Lago, but also for the insurrection, the continued efforts right now today to overturn this democracy in order to install Donald Trump as president. All right, folks, that's all the time I have for the public show. Patrons, stay tuned. I've got a lot more coming up after this next musical interlude. Everyone else, if you want to become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and sign up today. If not, well, I will see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.